This is Soccer 101 with Moon and Rocchio.
Hey, welcome back to Soccer 101. I am Moon. That is Matt Rocchio, and we have a lot to talk about here. Just with St. Louis City SC and the past couple matches, it's only been a week, but we had an MLS game. We had a Champions Cup game. We're about to have another MLS game. There was a signing in there. There was a couple starts that we were looking forward to. There's some controversy. We're going to get to all of it today in a quick episode because this is the weekend of week 2 for MLS as St. Louis SC St. Louis City SC take on New York City FC. So this is going to be this is going to be a great weekend, hopefully. And if you're listening to this post game, hopefully it was a great weekend for us. But let's start with last week, the match that kicked off the MLS season for St. Louis City SC against Real Salt Lake. My good friends over at Real Salt Lake. I'm wearing a hat that came from Salt Lake, but has nothing to do with soccer. And God dang it, Matt, we came away with 1 point, and I hate to say it, we didn't even deserve that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Saturday wasn't a good game. I mean, you compare it to Tuesday against Houston, which we're going to talk about, and it doesn't look as bad. But when you compare it with the first Houston game, it really was a little bit of a disappointment, a little bit of a letdown. RSL had a lot of problems last year in their defense giving up turnovers pretty high up the pitch. And despite, City wanting to play a high press and nominally playing the high press, they really just weren't able to create that kind of pressure against an RSL squad that they had been a few days before against Houston. I do want to say, because that thread is going to be fairly common as we talk about the RSL game and the second Dynamo game in Houston. I do want to say, though, how much, just as a blanket starting point, which is how much of the press in games in RSL and Houston 2, how much of the press was affected by the fact that they weren't always 100% on the back line. Because, again, the back line played pretty good against Houston, didn't do that well against RSL, but only let up 1 goal. But I'm just wondering, how much do you not press because you're worried about the back line? And I wonder, did we see that in the second half against RSL when Tim Parker had already gone out with an injury? Then Josh Yaro's getting nicked up with head injuries. Did we see them pull back the press because they don't want to extend a back line that is playing people out of position or playing mostly backups? And so that's kind of my big takeaway from those first 2 games. Because you're right, it wasn't good enough because the key of this team wasn't playing well. And before we, and that's my big takeaway from RSL. It wasn't good enough. And again, a lot like some problematic times in that first game, the win against Houston, it seemed like what this team needed was somebody to go one-on-one and take over the game. And that's how they got the 1 goal from Klauss Adeniran. The team game isn't there yet for City, and that's a problem.
That's the thing. You ask, was there an issue with the press? Was there an issue with the back line? To tell you the truth, I feel like I'm pretty astute at watching these matches back and even watching them a second time and kind of discovering, what the tactics are and all that. I have no idea. There was such a lack of spirit and such a lack of, for lack of a better term, soul from the team that I have no idea what their plan was. I have no idea what their plan was from the start. I have no idea what their plan was at the half with the subs. On paper, you can kind of see what they're going for, but it just lacked a ton of spirit. And we'll start with the RSL match. I've watched back all the highlight reels more than 3 times, and each time I had kind of a different takeaway from it. And one was the common thread was we didn't deserve a point, and I don't think RSL really earned one either.
No,
to tell you the truth,
right.
Dude, we had so many mistakes. They have a couple good attackers that honestly can't even finish all that well anyway. Because with the opportunities, I started counting the opportunities that we gave them, not opportunities that they created, opportunities that we literally just said, "Oh, here's a pass back," and I'm not even talking about that Leuven ball that he, horribly passed back. Marcanic didn't even sprint to cover. There was we're not talking about single mistakes. We're talking about 2 and 3 step mistakes from a team that just had no spirit. And I hate to say this, but last year the real strength wasn't just the skill and the luck and the ball bouncing our way a couple times for those first 5 matches. It was like a legitimate spirit. This team had shape, it had soul, it had like resilience on bouncing back, but it had like it seemed like a real mindset to just destroy people and I don't know, show some heart. And I'm not seeing any heart. I'm almost seeing like this weird fear. And I don't want to point out Josh Yarrow because I really like that guy. I'm really supporting that dude. But
He's been
half
under
the
a lot
time
of
out there,
pressure.
he looks like he's afraid to be there, and we can't have that.
And I think that a little bit goes back to what I was saying, earlier about just like wondering how much of the lack of pressing was the fact that your back line has not been healthy.
You're saying
Since
tactically? You're saying
I'm sticking tactically because I don't try to. That's where I'm going to go to. I'm never effort and things like that. I think there's little moments in heart and that kind of thing. There's little moments I think where you can pick it out, but I think there's other things where it gets over evaluated. Like Yarrow on the goal, against RSL. He's kind of he's moving a little awkwardly and he's taking kind of these like shuffling steps and not giving it his all. Probably just because he's out of position, he doesn't think he can get there. Well, some people are going to see like, well, that's low effort, and so I don't want to get into that discussion. So I'm just saying, just tactically, I think I'm just wondering is how much of this is going from the fact that as soon as Tuesday of last week, that first game at City Park ended against Houston, as soon as you don't have an 100% healthy back line, and as soon as your rotation is immediately screwed over, and maybe even not even there, because look, Dewar hasn't played through the first 3 games, and that's, I think, thrown off the rotation a little bit. I think you definitely saw that in Houston, and I just think maybe that's affecting the entire scheme, because the bottom line is the scheme is a press, and more so than last year. It's not about sitting back and absorbing pressure and then getting them on the transition. That was a big part last year. Now it's really is, I think, more so than ever before in all parts of the pitch, creating, winning the ball back as soon as possible. That idea of our best offense is coming off our own turnover because we turned the ball back over from them. That actual gegenpressing, not just a counter-attacking mindset, but a gegenpressing mindset, I really think is what they wanted. You saw them; they were pressing all the way up the field consistently against Houston in that very first game. But as soon as the back line takes some nicks, everything looks different against RSL and then again down in Houston. And I really think that's one of the reasons, while a lot of the comments I've seen from fans has been, well, what is this team's identity? Well, you saw it one time and you haven't seen it twice because you can't press high up the field when you don't have a back line that you can be consistent, that is going to snuff out those big over-the-top passes that get over your midfield and over the back line.
They have been caught with the ball behind them.
Yes.
I mean, every 2.5 minutes it seems,
yes.
and I don't know. So if you can't play a high line because you don't have the shape to catch up to some of these strikers, maybe that's just it. And I'm not talking about shape of the field. I'm talking about shape of the players. And I like how you're talking.
They do when they're healthy. It's just
Dude,
that as soon as Houston ended, they weren't healthy. As soon as the first game's over, people are already nicked up. You have the Nielsen factor that he's not 100% healthy. And again, the Dewar thing's weird to me. That's not an excuse. I'm legitimately wondering what has happened that Nicholas Dewar isn't ready to go. I know that unlike a guy like Matty Crooks, who's the English defender attacker who came out for RSL, he'd gotten there like 3 days before, and then he played against City off the bench. Why has Dewar not come off the bench? Well, he hasn't played in 2 months because of the way the season works before he got to City, and now he's been working his way in. I don't know if that's a mistake. I don't know if someone fitness isn't 100%, or if that's just one of the things you got to chalk up of. That's the way the game works when you're getting transfers in. But their defense hasn't been healthy since at game 1, and I really do think that's affecting things. It's not an excuse. It's a reason. The problem is, now here's the thing where I don't want to make an excuse. As soon as everything starts kind of cracking on Tuesday, and the Kyle Hebert injury going in is obviously a huge variable there, can we criticize City for not having a secondary option to go to that can consistently find them looks without having that high press? And my answer to that would be, I think we saw that in 2 games in Houston against RSL, where they were trying a lot more 1-2s, quick passing in corridors to try to open things up. And the answer to that is they simply couldn't complete the freaking pass. And so I think there's a lot of questions and answers and variables here that we don't know 100% about, because again, did they change the system because they couldn't play their high pressing one? I think they kind of did, but then they horribly failed at enacting that new system. And do you want to put that on the players or the staff or what have you? That's your call, but I think that's what happened.
I know what you're saying. I understand the injuries are playing a huge part, but fitness overall is clearly an issue, and they're not connecting any passes. If they're shifting if they're shifting strategies and shapes and formations and all that kind of stuff, you still got to put passes together, and the passes have been horrible. And I'm just going to say, individually speaking, as a defender, I don't care if I've lost a leg. Like I need to be seen as a scary person out there, and you are in my zone, and this is my zone, and I'm not going to let you feel on balance. I'm not going to let you feel like you have control here. I'm not going to let you feel like this is going to be your ball. And I hate to say that as somebody that never, played pro ball or something, but like as a defender, when you see a squad, they don't have to be the greatest defenders. They just have to be the gnarliest territorial people. They're bulldogs. You're supposed to be a bulldog, and you're supposed to make these people feel very uneasy after the second minute of the game has elapsed, feel very uneasy coming forward. And I haven't seen not a single defender in 3 starts and a couple subs coming in, not one of them make that back line theirs in any way. They seem scared when the ball gets back here, like, oh God, I got to do something. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's a mental thing. I don't know what's going on in training. I really don't know. But they've been playing like they aren't just going after it. And this is last season was such an aggressive, like we are a counterattacking aggressive team. We're going to be quick. And I haven't seen anything of all the philosophical talk from last year. Not one flash, not even like oh, there it is, and we blew it, or oh, he swing and a miss. Like I haven't seen.
Are you talking about across the whole team, or are you specifically talking about the back line right now?
For the most part, I'm talking about the back line and the midfield.
Okay, so here's my thing. I think the back line, and let's move forward to Houston a little bit here. I think the back line, considering you're talking about a Michael Wenzel who's coming up from your City 2 team on a short-term loan. You were playing Akil Watts out of position at left back, and this is a guy who was a midi last year, switched to right back, and now he's playing left back right out of the gate for his first start of the season. So I actually thought the back line played pretty well against Houston, except for the fact that they, as you put it extremely well, and this is exactly what Bradley Carnell said after the game in Houston, that a lack of aggressiveness and I guess instead of waiting for the ball to come to you, a proactiveness on the ball is what caused Houston's first goal. He even said, if we have Nielsen or Parker in for that ball, they probably make a play on it and don't let it bounce, and that Houston goal probably doesn't happen. But overall, outside of the one big moment, I do think the back line showed a lot of heart against Houston in that second game in Houston. I just think that game, even more so than RSL, was just a completely anemic offense that doomed City from the get-go.
Yeah, so let's talk about the details. First leg of the match, or of the Champions Cup with Houston Dynamo, took place in City Park. They got the win, but as we talked about going with the aggregate, Houston had a goal here at City Park. So the only situation we really didn't want going to second leg back in Houston was a 1-0 loss, because we would then have 0 away goals and the aggregate score would be 2-2, but Houston would have the advantage on the away goal that they got the previous week in City Park, and that is exactly what happened. Eric Svatchenko's goal in the 60th minute gave Houston the lead and ultimately the win, because City just couldn't turn anything into action to make a goal. Now, they signed a short-term loan agreement with City SC, St. Louis City 2's Michael Wenzel, and he made his first start. Also, MLS Super Draft pick Jose Kojima made his first start for City SC, and that was cool to see. I think he's going to be a key component to a lot of the speed, a lot of the aggression, and everything that we're hoping to see later in the season. But it wasn't enough. And on paper, Rocchio, you're looking at this. You're looking at this on paper. You got Nerwinski, you got Wenzel, you got Nilsson, you got Watts, you got Durkin, you got Kojima, and then Leuven comes in for Kojima in the 72nd minute. You got Ostrak in there. Ostrak, I love him. He takes shots. I like this guy. He was replaced by Jackson in the 58th. You love Jackson, and he's got speed. He's got creativity. He's got it all. Vasilev starts. Then Celio comes in for him at the 58th. We got Adeniran. And Thorson takes over for him in the 72nd, and Klauss. But those Adeniran and Klauss both starts on paper. This starting lineup is over Houston. It's a better team. It should
here's the thing,
should
though.
produce a goal or two.
You say that, but let's put some context on this really quick. Again, an Akil Watts playing out of position, a Michael Wenzel starting on loan, a Nielsen who is not at 100% fitness, playing a second game in 4 days. And then you have a MLS Super Draft rookie making his first ever start. So just out of the gate, that's 4 positions of your back 6 that have little question marks around them because you don't know 100% what's going to happen because you're putting a player out of position, you're straining their fitness, or this is a guy who's put in a high-pressure situation as a first-time starter. I mean, those are 4 pretty big variables when you're going up against a Houston team that's playing a very similar lineup to what they did a week ago and has some killers in their lineup like Kareskia, who almost made a difference last week and then made a difference this week. And so a guy like Crooks coming off the bench.
Would you have started Jackson and Leuven and then, with the intention of subbing them out at the half or just beyond?
I don't think you could start Leuven where his fitness was. The Jackson one, and again, Jackson had already played 180 minutes, about 180 minutes through the first 2 games. So his fitness there's no chance that he was at 100%, even though I know he's young and he says the trainer told him you only need 2 days to recover. He runs so damn much. He's got to be one of the highest runners on the team, especially non-flanking position. I'm guessing probably 5 or 6 miles a game. And so I understand why they had to go to this lineup. This is not a surprising thing. I mean, if you watch Champions League and stuff like that, I mean, teams don't always have their 100% lineups for these matchups because it's a midweek game or it's pressuring them, on their league schedule and things like that. I'm not saying
we're still early in the season. Yeah, we're not 6 or 7 matches in.
Because Houston was dealing with the exact same schedule. Exactly. But again, I think it's not fair and it's not an excuse, but the Kyle Hebert knee knock in training that knocked him out for 10 days completely changed how this week of soccer went for City. That's not an excuse. That's a fact. That is a fact.
That's how it goes.
This would have looked completely different if they had Kyle Hebert, whether they needed him to play left back against Houston or center back against Houston or center back against RSL. It's a completely different look. I'm not saying the outcome's different. I'm saying what happens and the variables in there are different if Kyle Hebert doesn't get his knee busted up in training and out for 10 days. But it's little things like that change your season. Really quickly, because we're chronologically through both RSL and Houston, before we get forward, talk about some new things here, I want to go back to the St. Louis City press conference yesterday. Bradley Carnell dropped some incredibly great informational nuggets in his presser yesterday. First of all, right off the bat, here's Bradley Carnell talking about his thoughts about the first 3 games from the City perspective.
We compare ourselves to ourselves, and we look at last year's not just data, but the eye test as well. And we feel that we have a lot of energy about us. We feel that we have, in the first 2 games, we show glimpses of what we can do. We show tons of energy. Our counter pressures and our actions around the ball are a lot higher than last year. Take out the Houston game. Our PPDA was on average of the whole of last year. So we look at all these things and compare ourselves to ourselves because that was a good barometer. That's a good level to compare ourselves to. Obviously, to Tom's point, we're not looking back. But the Houston game, we let ourselves down in that department where we didn't show the signature of our team. And that's what we were most disappointed about.
The signature of our team. That was well said. And I appreciate,
which is, he said PPDA, which is one of their stat measurements of how much they press and how well they're doing in that one. It's higher than last year. For anyone that says, what is the identity of this team? Are they pressing like last year? The plan is abso-freaking-lutely. You go back and watch. If you're one of those people who, if you recorded it or have it saved on like your YouTube TV because that game was on FS2, that first game against Houston. You can go back and watch it. Watch the first half, even when they didn't score, and watch how many times Klauss Adeniran and AZ Jackson pressured a ball carrier and made him kick it back to the goalie, or how many times they pressured the goalie when he had the ball. I want to guess that Steve Clark had about 17 to 20 passes in that first game in City Park. He had 12 in that second game in Houston. They weren't pressuring him nearly as much. The ball was not on the foot of the tender consistently the way it was that first week because the pressure wasn't there. My theory is, again, it goes back to the back line, but you saw it right there, Carnell, putting a big line between what we saw against the first game in Houston, what we saw against RSL, and then that second game in Houston. Clearly, it wasn't enough. I actually thought this was fascinating. Carnell broke down some more of the, not PPDA. Here he's talking about the offense they create from transition. And I really think this is a great point about what they want to be going forward.
I thought there was some moments where, we're looking to combine in short, tight spaces, and we're looking to be us. And then obviously our bread and butter is the transition, right? So, the whole of last year, we had 5.5 shots in our transition phases on average per game. Over the first two games, the Champions League against Houston, against RSL, we had 7 shots in the transition phase. So, against Houston, it went down to 2 in the transition. So again, a day and night difference from the 3 games, from the Houston game to the first 2 competitive games that we played this year.
So there you saw it.
I love being a fan of Carnell, and I love the fact that he's the guy that is doing this, because they play excellent stat ball, and everybody's playing stat ball and money ball, and I love the fact that they do, because I'm only going to think like that if I have to, and the position that I'm taking, especially doing this podcast so passionately, is that I don't want to necessarily focus on that kind of stuff. So, I love that the team is, but I just want to see the faces. I want to see the spirit. I want to see the killers in these guys. And that's what it is. Cause ultimately, it's going to come down to these little moments, these little goal differences, these picking up a point instead of 3, or even dropping 3 points. And I just want to see the aggression of each individual out there, playing like it matters, like every minute matters. You know what I mean? That's what I want to see, man. That's what I'm here for, baby.
I'm with you on that one, Moon. From my side, though, I do love hearing things and really getting the explanation. Last year, over 5 shots per game were being created out of the transition. They created 7 total through the first 2 games. Clearly, that's still not enough. And if I had to go back and break it down, I think they created 5 against Houston in the first game and 2 against RSL. But he's drawn the line, and then he points out that it was 2 against Houston in Houston. Those are big differences that's showing you why they weren't able to, why the offense looked so different. There's another clip I have in Carnell here. I'm not going to play this one, but he kind of throws it off. He finishes off by saying, he goes, "We did not look like City in Houston this past game." And then it comes down to that. That was a disappointing game. Everyone's acknowledged that. Everyone wants to throw that one completely out because it was not the game that City wants to play or expects to play. One big thing that I've seen discussed lately, the formations always is going to be a big topic, Moon. One thing people have been talking about is whether or not the 2 striker formations, or specifically the Sam and Klauss formations together, are the best thing for City. What are your thoughts going forward about that combination? Would you like to see a Sam and Adeniran be more of a rotational pieces inside of a 1 striker formation, or do you think that the Klauss, Sam on the field at the same time is the best thing going forward?
I am completely unresolved, because last year we saw a lot of the rotation kind of stuff, and to tell you the truth, it always made me nervous. I was always like, oh, okay, we're putting a lot on one guy here and rotating a few different people. Let's give them a solid 5-6 week streak there of starting them together and see what chemistry they can develop. I'm not in training. I don't see what they're doing. I don't see them off the field. I think I really like both of them personally, from what I can see on social media and everything. And they seem to be agreeable cats, where they can do some pretty, chemistry based things together beyond just their skills. But I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, and I think it's too early to really think about that. So going back to last year and what I wanted as far as an experiment goes, this is what I want to see. I want to see them starting together to see if they can really get some pacing together. Now, listen, dude, again, I'm happy that everybody in our league and in our team is playing stat ball, but I want to see drama and talking about the identity from last year. What we saw was drama in a good way. We were taking drama everywhere we went. Every away match, these other teams were like, this team is on fire. They've got a soul, they've got a spirit, they've got a ton of fuel backing them. They're nowhere near burning their afterburners right here. They have a soul of intensity. There was an intensity to it. I want to see drama from this team, and I'm hoping that those two together can get some momentum and really create some drama as a pair. That's what you want. You want two deadly weapons up top. At least, I do. I think, especially with Joe Aquini being out, I think that this is the logical step to take, right? To give them a chance to see if we can be a two-striker attack.
I think you've used the word shape a couple times in this episode, and that's why I honestly think that the question shouldn't be for me whether or not Klauss and Sam is the best combination. I think the answer to the question is that City's the best when they bring in a two-striker shape, and I think you see that with Adeniran's ability to attack from the wing, where he's gotten a lot of his most dangerous chances this year, where he's gotten both of his goals this year, is him attacking from the wing. And I think that you need a second person playing in the middle to keep that shape and keep that danger in the middle. It doesn't have to be Klauss. It can be Thor. It can be Pompeu. It was Pompeu, in fact, on that goal for Sam where he cut back inside from the byline earlier this year. It was Pompeu who was the striker that allowed the other secondary striker that allowed him to get that width, because he knew, if I can go out here and get wide, I'm not leaving that space completely unoccupied. There's no danger there. And so I think the answer is here, which is because of Sam's ability to attack from the wing, you need to always have two strikers. And because of Klauss's ability to drop back and play into a secondary striker or a shadow striker or almost a number 10 role, because of how much he likes to press defenders with the ball, I think that always means you need somebody else who can be the more forward player. That if Klauss does win the ball back, don't worry, there's still somebody forward who has finishing ability, who's pressing the back line, even though Klauss is at midfield winning this ball. Now you have those two things. The question is that not a congruent combination? Whereas if Klauss wants to win the ball at midfield coming back, and Adeniran wants to attack from the flank, maybe they don't actually fit together. And maybe the best combination for those guys is somebody like a Thor or a Pompeu who can constantly be pressing the back line while they either, one, go attack the flank for Sam, or go back to midfield to press the ball for Klauss. So I actually think the question here isn't whether or not Klauss and Sam is the best combination. I think the conclusion is City is best as a two-striker team because of Klauss and Sam, but maybe Klauss and Sam aren't always the best combination for a full 90, because you need those periods where, again, Sam can go attack the flank, but he needs Klauss to stay in the middle. But then Klauss can't be dropping back and attacking the ball necessarily because Sam's already out on the flank. That's where I think the question becomes. I think they can work together well in pockets, but I do think that, a substitution, bringing one of them in at the 60, having one of them play 90, flipping that role for the next game would be an interesting combination. Here's the thing, though. We're going to talk about this in a little bit. Schedule congestion just got a lot easier for St. Louis City.
Yeah, it sure did.
And so maybe you don't even need that rotationary thing. So maybe the question is just figuring out more, how Sam and Zhao can combine their two different styles of playing a similar position together on the field at the same time. And let's get into why that schedule congestion just got a little bit lighter, Moon. And that's because
this is the latest drama.
Yeah, you just got bumped out of Champions Cup, which is unfortunate. And because you were in the Champions Cup, this also means because of the new ruling coming down, you will not be playing in the U.S. Open Cup. And obviously, if you're a St. Louis City fan, you know about this, you know why it's a big deal. And if you're just a casual fan, I'll explain to you really quickly why this is such a big deal for so many St. Louis City fans. You probably have, podcasters or fans of City that have been very expressive about why this is such a big problem. And that's because St. Louis has an incredible history with the U.S. Open Cup. 11 different times in the St. Louis history, they have won the U.S. Open Cup. And the way that U.S. Open Cup's been back to the earliest days is you had amateur teams, from companies who are participating in this competition. So it's history in a lot of ways, and then if it's for people who have become bonded with world soccer, view the U.S. Open Cup the same way they do, the FA Cup in England, as these ways for lower teams to host these powers, to make money that helps them, their entire fund their entire season, that helps these smaller teams enrich the game overall. And the U.S. Open Cup is our version of it here in the United States. And last year, St. Louis City hosted an Open Cup game, and it was the 10th largest crowd for any round ever, and it was the largest ever for the third round Open Cup game ever. And so there's that history, and there's that connection to the grassroots part of soccer, which we've talked about before, of how important that is to soccer. And for some reason, inexplicably, MLS decided to say, screw that. There's too much congestion in our schedule. We'll give you our MLS Next Pros teams, and that's it. But then U.S. Soccer, came out and said, listen, the clearly states that if you are a Division I team, a top division club, you have to play in every tournament possible. And that includes the U.S. Open Cup, because they created the Leagues Cup, which is the other competition City will compete in. And they created that to create a competition between Liga MX and the MLS. And it's a money grab. That's just what it is. That's what the tournament for the Leagues Cup is. It's a money grab. They want to make more money. That's why they created it. That's why there's schedule congestion that needed to be fixed by getting rid of the only grassroots competition where non-professional clubs actually get to participate, and lower clubs like USL clubs and things like that get to participate. And so the money grab led to them butchering the U.S. Open Cup. Now they've made it so that the teams that were in the Champions Cup will not participate in the U.S. Open Cup. So 8 clubs will be excluded: Columbus, Inter Miami, Cincinnati, St. Louis City, Orlando City, New England Revolution, Nashville, Philadelphia, and Vancouver. The Houston Dynamo, despite being in the Champions Cup, are the champions right now of the U.S. Open Cup, so they will stay in it. And then the next 7 teams in the MLS Supporter Shield standings will send their first team, and then other clubs will send their 9 MLS affiliated next pro teams. And then there will also be a couple other independent teams that are added to the tournament as well. Bottom line, though, because City has been eliminated from the Champions Cup already, it doesn't matter. They will not be in the U.S. Open Cup. And obviously, fans of St. Louis are not very happy about this. I'm going to read this post from yesterday from the St. Louligans on Twitter/X. Quote unquote, "We are furious and disappointed in the decision of MLS to reduce participation in the U.S. Open Cup. The Open Cup is a foundation of soccer in America, and St. Louis's participation in the tournament has been a statement of pride for soccer fans in St. Louis. To not have our club participating is an insult to the St. Louligans as longtime supporters of soccer in St. Louis. The excuse of quote-unquote schedule congestion that they have created with a cash grab tournament is MLS trying to erase the strong history of St. Louis and the national soccer landscape. As a result, individual members will make their own decision regarding attending the Leagues Cup. Leadership is not attending and advising to boycott in support of the Open Cup. We will not be participating in game day events and in game activities as a result during the Leagues Cup. This is not a lack of support for our players and staff. It is a referendum on the atrocious decision of MLS to ignore the history of soccer that St. Louis has played a vital role in." On the other side, really quickly, Moon, I do want to say that City President Diego Giuliani did release a statement earlier in an article with Tom Timmerman of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, where he came out and said that our perspective is we understand the decision made by MLS and U.S. Soccer. At the same point, our preference would have been to be able to play in this competition. St. Louis as a city has a really rich history in this competition. The competition already has its own rich history, and St. Louis and teams from St. Louis have a rich history within that competition, ranging all the way back to the beginning of the century and more recent with the USL team that was here. So we would have liked to play in the competition. That has been our consistent position with the MLS through this negotiating period. One last final point, Moon, I do want to say that the MLS Sporting and Competition Committee is most likely who made this decision. It is a 13-person committee that St. Louis City is not currently on.
Interesting. Man, I here's my take is this. This is awful. It sucks. It's horrible for us as fans. It's not great for the team or really the sport in the country. I really think it does. It will chip away a lot from that. Now, do I think it's personal? No, I think it's pure business. I think that's the only thing that's really not right about the statement necessarily that the Luligans made, but I back them in everything that they said. And what can you do? What do you do other than respectfully boycott like they are the League's Cup? I totally support that. I don't know if I'll
It's
be able to, I don't know if
it's
I'll
a
be able to
perfectly
do that,
connected boycott.
but
The
that's
League's
exact
Cup,
right.
I
I mean,
love it.
that's those are the
That's how you
options
do
that
it.
you're left. Yeah, those are the options that you're left with, and they
That's
stand
how you
by
do it.
exactly how they feel. And I understand how they feel like it's a personal thing. I don't think it's a personal thing. I think, like Rocchio said, it's money. It's a money grab. It's business, and this is they're running it like they're running it, and it sucks. It sucks horribly bad. I'm hoping that some change may be enacted by the Luligans and people like the Luligans.
Here's the thing.
I
It's a
I hope it
1
has
year
effect.
it's a 1 year thing. So the hope is that you show the MLS why this is such a problem, and
Yeah.
they make the appropriate changes to the 2025 US Open Cup. First teams are back in it,
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
I think they're doing the right thing
Honestly, here's the thing.
within their power.
I'll throw a bone to this consideration. Teams, if they want to, and this is simple actually. This isn't even throwing a bone. This isn't even throwing a bone to MLS about this. This is just how you do it. Change your stupid roster rules so that teams can
Can
expand
bring
their
people up.
rosters for US Open Cup
Yep,
games.
that's
And
it.
if they want to essentially treat it like an MLS Next Pro game, that is the
All power to
franchise's
them.
choice to do so. But to just not give them the chance because they were in the Champions Cup. I'm sorry, it's dumb because in Diego Gigliani, a lot of people aren't happy with his statement because City didn't come out effusively before the statement
Yeah,
saying we stand for
that's
this.
that's
We
exactly
stand
how
for
he has
this.
to play it.
Of course, yeah.
That's
It's
how he has
dumb.
to play it.
It's dumb that people are mad about this. You're part of a league. The MLS is different in that the league has more power than the owners. I think, which is a lot different than any other sports league
Right.
in America. Where
There's
the
a
owners
game
are
to
all
be played. There is a game to
exactly.
be played.
And so there's a game to be played. So it's ridiculous, and it's an unreal expectation to think City should have come out here and took their shoe off and banged their shoe on the table until the change was made. But Diego even explains in that excellent article by Tom Timmerman that this would have been a good way for them to play younger players, the bottom half of their roster. That's how Diego says it. So that's a good thing because you're playing USL teams. You don't have to act like you have to play your first team roster. You play your lower roster, but more importantly, you play the game in Omaha. You play the game in Birmingham. You play the game in Tacoma or what have you, because it's about growing the game. And the team's worth 200, 300 million can afford to make that trip. And then it helps the soccer fan because those cities that maybe don't have MLS profiles now have a reason for 10,000 people to go watch a soccer game over a weekend. And the benefit of that is that Michael Wenzel gets to play another 90 without having to use one of his loans. And Caden Glover, who's could be one of your stars as a homegrown player, could now have real game tape that City fans who are casual fans who aren't ever going to maybe watch a City 2 game or an MLS Next Pro game, now they can see Caden Glover play. And what a novel concept that would be a good thing for the fans who are just casual to see a guy who's 16, 17 and could be on this team in this organization for 10, 12, 15 years of his career. And it could be this beautiful connection these fans make with a player who's going to be here and who's going to grow up with them. That'd be wonderful. What a great thing it could be for soccer and make an MLS and City. But for some reason,
and ultimately it will pay dividends to the MLS.
Exactly.
The more top flight soccer in this country going around, gaining fans, churning up business, churning up excitement, that's ultimately going to be as good for the MLS as anybody, as it has been this last 25 years.
100%. And so I don't know how the roster expansion wasn't such an easy thing for them to just be like, well, you have too many games to play. Okay, how does every other large club in the first division club in the world handle this situation? They play their youth team essentially in the early rounds. What a novel concept.
Yeah.
You stole the most boring thing from Europe and how you name your teams, and then decide that everything else from that continent is taboo. and it's the dumbest thing in the world.
That's a great take there, Rocchio.
I
That
appreciate
is.
that. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
but I mean, they do have to do things differently just because the only thing that we do similarly is steal the names.
Exactly. Let's wrap this one up, Moon, with a little conversation looking towards New York City FYC. The game's going to be coming up here in about 10 hours or so when the podcast will post. So I'm expecting a good game here from City. They got to get everything back. They've had a little bit of time of rest. I'm expecting the high press to be extra in action and high up the pitch. And I think City's going to be looking for an early goal.
For sure. City SC won all 3 of its home matches against Eastern Conference opponents last year, combined 11-2, scoring at least 3 times in all 3 matches. So the stats, if we're playing stats, they're with us. The match is going to
playing stat ball.
That's right. It's going to mark the first ever meeting between City SC and New York City FC. They won 17 MLS regular season away matches last season. New York City FC did, finishing with a record of 1-8-8, scoring 12 and conceding 23 goals in those matches. Now, New York City FC kicked off this season with a 1-0 loss away to Charlotte FC, and they conceded in the 8th minute. Early on in the game, never came back, just didn't look that great. They finished 11th last year in the Eastern Conference with 9-11-14 record, and just missed out on the MLS playoffs by 2 points. So they got something to prove. They have Rodriguez in the center. He's an assist guy. Here's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to taking advantage of a team that's kind of got the wind, not really in their sails at all yet, not from last season, not from this season so far. What I'm hoping to see, man, and we were talking about this earlier with the shape, especially with Klauss and Adeniran up top, dude, like this is we can play stat ball and we can talk stats and we can figure it out, but this isn't a sales team. We need like plays put together. I'm hoping to see some chemistry build, but you got to see some of the results of training out on the pitch. And I just haven't seen that in 3 matches. I haven't seen that yet at all. I haven't seen designed plays or what looks like maybe designed plays. I haven't seen somebody put a ball somewhere without looking because they know somebody's going to be there. I haven't seen any of that stuff yet. And I'm hoping that we start to see not just the confidence and the spirit and the push, but I'm hoping we see some really designed play. You know what I mean? Because again, like this is not a sales team. We're talking about athletes that need to move and change and be creative. And I just haven't seen any creativity yet. And I'm really hoping to see that here against a perfect team to show it off. I really do feel like New York City FC, this is a great opponent because this isn't somebody to take lightly, but it's also somebody that you can kind of use and abuse, I feel, if our team is hitting all the marks.
Absolutely. One thing I will say to watch out for, they have 2 new wingers that have been getting into the game more. Hannes Wolf played 83 minutes in their first game, and Jovan Mijatovic, who's an 18-year-old Serbian star they brought over, only played 29 minutes in that first game. So watch out for those 2 young guys. If they're playing a little bit more, that could be where NYC FC kind of finds their new offense after a rough season last year. So watch out for those names. The City back line still a little bit said what's going to happen here. Tim Parker is more ready than Josh Yarrow. I expect to see probably Parker and Nielsen, maybe not the full game, but I expect to see a more whole back line. And again, I think that means we're going to see a lot more of the high press back in action.
Yeah, man, let's just hope that we continue the streak for New York City FC, who only won 1 of those away matches. They're terrible on the road so far. So let's keep that going.
There you go. How about what do you think could be a good start for the City game, you think?
Well, I think we should keep it going with like a second minute goal!